Greetings, World Hoppers, and welcome to the Bahoverse. With Worlds Beyond right around the corner, we'll soon get to experience a brand new story to enjoy. And based on the Q&As with the devs, it is confirmed that the stories of Shadowverse Classic and Worlds Beyond are somehow connected. With that said, I think this is the perfect opportunity to discuss about some of the major questions that are left unanswered in the first game, and let's also theorize about what we can expect in the story of the second game. This goes without saying, but major spoilers ahead if you haven't finished the story. But don't worry, I'm currently working on a video on the complete story of Shadowverse, so that new and old players alike can catch up to speed on the events of the first story. Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment if you want to see that soon. Well, without further ado, let's talk about the major questions and theories for the story of Shadowverse Worlds Beyond. Let's start off with the major questions. The first question is, what are worlds? This never really got clearly defined in the first game. Certainly, our heroes were jumping from one world to another world with completely different cultures and people, but if you look closely, the quote-unquote worlds they've been hopping to only focus on a specific kingdom, town, or city. Aleister is just a kingdom, Isunia is a large river sitting in the middle of a large body of water, Ailon is a dystopian mech/cyberpunk city, Natera is one big forest, Reveil is a Wild West town in the middle of nowhere, Velsar is Reveil, so it's also a town. Ametsushi is one big inn located in God knows where. Lanecrest, which sadly doesn't have its own world map, is a premier academy for mages in the surrounding kingdom. And lastly, Sal is not even this whole map, it's just this village. The name of the land that it inhabits was never clarified. What about the other towns, cities, countries, or even the continents? If you read closely, some characters mention of foreign lands, like when Marlon mentioned that he is well versed in the customs of other lands, or how the students of Lanecrest were being trained to be great mages for the kingdom where the academy is located. More obvious is that Ametsushi is basically a hub world for inhabitants of different worlds. Also, remember how the citizens of Reveil evacuated to the neighboring town through the use of icy strain? Let's not forget that besides these 9 main worlds, we also have worlds that were mentioned in passing, like Ladlure, Mage's world, or the world of origin of Itsurigi, and basically all of the characters from Ametsushi. For beings that supposedly have the power to destroy worlds, Nexus and Nerva repeatedly lose to a handful of people that were just defending their hometown. It's definitely something worth thinking about. Related to the previous one, the next major question is, who was the Keeper of Stagnation? For that matter, how many Keepers actually exist in the Shadowverse universe? Or shall we say, the Shadowverse multiverse? First off, we never really got to see what the Keeper of Stagnation looked like. What we can only tell is that its powers are probably a more formidable version of Floessa's abilities of stopping time. We may never really get to see what Floessa's Keeper looked like, but this begs the question, how many Keepers are there? We know for a fact that Keepers are forces of nature that go from world to world to exterminate said worlds, and based on this alone, it implies that there are many, arguably infinite number of Keepers. Yuan also mentioned that even if Ares didn't summon Nexus, another Keeper would eventually come for the world anyways. If you go further down this rabbit hole, you will find yourself asking, how are Keepers created? Where do they come from? Are there Keepers with a vastly similar or vastly different mindsets from Nerva? Are Keepers as old as the universe? Hopefully we can gather more information regarding Keepers in the new story, and I'm looking forward if some of these questions are answered. If you haven't reached the end of the story, then this one's a major spoiler. Now I'm talking about the mysterious being that humbled Nerva. Whatever this being is, he says that their name is not that important. He tells Nerva that she can call him Shiva, Odin, or whatever god you can think of from the Rob lore. I think that the writers of the story purposefully made this character vague, and more about him will be revealed in the next story. Hopefully. What we do know is that this mysterious being is an entity beyond the multiverse, an entity that is more powerful than enhanced Keepers like Nerva. We can also tell that he keeps the Keepers in check to not overstep their boundaries, which Nerva unfortunately did. With all that said, we may never really know the true identity of this mysterious being. Some speculations say that he is the god of the entirety of the Shadowverse multiverse, and some say that he is one of Cygame's game developers or producers, which leads many to believe that this is the one and only Yuito Kimura, KMR himself. Speaking of mysterious characters, let's talk about them. Yes, Them, the rabbit and the squirrel that we are introduced to in the final CG of the story. Not much can be said about them aside from the fact that they were talking animals. And we're reading a book which is assumed to be the complete story of Shadowverse. This whole sequence was odd, for me at least, and had a completely different tone, almost ominous from the rest of the story. A common theory of the significance of this part is that Shadowverse is just one big book, and everything that has happened is just what was written in the book. Basically, throughout all this time, we were just listening to the narration of the rabbit and the squirrel. If they were just the narrators, then who is the author of the book? The mysterious being? Anyways, this is something to keep in mind going into the new story. Now, for the next set of questions, these are more specific to certain arcs of the story. Let's start with Lanecrest. If you could remember, everything was tied up nicely during this arc. Nerva was expelled from Castell, Verdelia was able to come to terms with her past and became closer with her little sister, Amaryllis broke free from Lilim's magic and is now on equal terms with her, and Lyelth defeated his father, Cornelius, stopping him from doing evil once and for all. Wait a minute. Cornelius? Yeah, whatever happened to him? The aftermath of the conflict in Lanecrest, Verdelia mentions that Cornelius vanished after the battle. Lilium has stepped down from being student council president and is undergoing a change of heart with Amaryllis. But Cornelius? We never got a conclusion. I don't know, this line of dialogue that states that Cornelius is still out there seems very significant. But what this significance is, it's anybody's guess. It would be interesting to see how this connects to Worlds Beyond, or if this has any connections at all with Worlds Beyond's story. Moving on to Ametsuchi. Our next question would be what is Kunitsu Amachi up to now? We know from the end of the Ametsuchi arc that Kunitsu realized the errors of the inn's ways of erasing its clients' memories, and prayed that all of its clients may find respite even after all that has happened. We have to wonder though, is Ametsuchi still open? Will people still stumble upon the inn when they walk the line between life and death? If it is still open and becomes renovated, it may become a hub world again for interdimensional travelers. This concept isn't far off from Worlds Beyond, but I digress. It seems like Kunitsu is all alone in Ametsuchi, so it's curious to see what happened to him. Another thing worth noting about him is that, despite being a side character, he is a vessel based on the markings on his skin. A powerful one at that because he has the power to create Ametsuchi, much like how Floes created Reveal. This is a crucial detail because if Kunitsu is a vessel, then who is his keeper? We know of Nexus, Nerva, and the aforementioned Keeper of Stagnation, but the identity of this fourth mysterious keeper is still unknown. Or maybe we're just overthinking things and that people can become vessels without needing a keeper, though this confuses a lot of things. Also, what even was the Great Spider? Was it just some sort of creature with the main purpose of keeping the operations of Ametsuchi alive, like storing the memory fragments and keeping the guests trapped? In any case, we can only wait for Worlds Beyond if these unanswered questions would be solved. Following the trend of going backwards through the worlds, we're now on to Natera. And boy, there's a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the big mommy of Natera, Viridia Magna. We know that she's the goddess of Natera, and that she has a lot of ether that gives life to Natera. What we do not know much about her is her complete backstory. While Ares was uncovering the past of Natera, she stumbled upon a record of Viridia Magna's origin story, which goes as follows. Once upon a time, in our world of Natera, the citizenry lived in fear of both beast and spirit. Our people were weak against the claws and fangs of the animals, small compared to the fury of nature and its spectral representatives. It was an epoch of massive suffering. That is, until a lone girl, distraught and clinging to a starving friend, looked up to the stars and made a wish. She asked for a way, any way, to save her friends, her family, and all the peoples of the world, to deliver them from their suffering. A wandering mage appeared before her. Having heard her call, he bestowed upon her the power to link man, beast, and spirit, a power he called Ether. The people forged bonds with spirits through Ether, gaining bounty and strength. They now had the means to survive. However, the girl's newfound powers morphed her mortal flesh, and her body became an ethereal vessel, akin to that of a spirit. With great respect and gratitude for her sacrifice, the peoples of Natera raised their prayers and called her spiritual form into the trunk of a sacred tree. The brave girl had been deified as a mother goddess. Eventually, she became known as Viridia Magna, the abundance of life incarnate, and the eternal protector of Natera. This was an interesting backstory because it reveals that Viridia Magna was just an ordinary girl before. This leads to the question of who was the wandering mage that gave her the power of Ether. This is intriguing because the mage gave her enough power to turn her into a goddess. Some speculate that the wandering mage was a keeper, and that said keeper gave Viridia her ether powers. However, she lacks any noticeable vessel markings similar to the ones on Yuan and Meisha. In a similar vein, who was Viridia Magna's starving friend that she was clinging onto? Did her friend survive? If he or she did survive, where is this friend now? These questions make me want to see a story dedicated to this backstory, because certainly there's a lot to uncover here. Maybe a side story is in order. Another thing that was revealed in this backstory was that there were 3 major periods in Natera's history. First was during the period of man living with ferocious beasts and spirits. Second was during the period of technological advancement, and the people that lived during this time were called the Ancients. Thus, this period is, funnily enough, consists of the ancient civilization of Natera. This was also the time when Viridia Magna was exploited for her ether that ultimately caused the demise of this civilization. The last period is modern Natera, which consists of the current events that we know of that happened in the main story. The only character to have ever experienced all 3 periods is Viridia Magna, and it would be interesting to see if we ever get to know more about her in the next game. Still in Natera, our next major question would be, who was the creator, otherwise known as the advisor, of the Virgo mechanism? For context, everything I'm talking about right now was during the ancient technological civilization of Natera. In case you didn't know, the Virgo mechanism was a project that was dedicated in draining the ether from Viridia Magna. This project ultimately ended Natera's ancient civilization due to the depletion of their ether supplies. Going back to the advisor, it was assumed to be Baphomet because we don't know anyone else who was both evil and has enough technological prowess to operate the Virgo mechanism. But then came invasion of the World River, which confirms that Baphomet has never set foot on Natera before his invasion, and this arc also confirms that Natera's ancient civilization, Centralis, is not the technological city of Iolon. Aside from the fact that he isn't familiar with the place, Baphomet even mentions that the reason he was sent to Natera by Nerva was because he was capable of controlling the machines of the ancient Naterans, machines that are native to this world, machines that he did not create. If Baphomet isn't the advisor, then who was it? The story also implies that this advisor is another vessel, and you know what that means? That means another unidentified keeper. It was never confirmed whether or not it was Nerva that influenced ancient Natera's destruction, but if she wasn't the keeper back then, this means that we have a 5th unidentified keeper. Going back to the advisor, while indeed it would make sense to think that the advisor is a vessel, as it was implied in the story, and even the wiki confirms it to be. One line of dialogue really throws me off. And let me quote Gerard L. Vaindish, a citizen of ancient Natera, in regard to the destruction of their civilization. Just like management to leave when the going gets tough, he even had the nerve to call himself the messenger of our keeper, whatever that is. The messenger of our keeper, you say. Does that ring any bells for you? What I'm talking about here is the possibility of the advisor being a seraph rather than being a vessel. I know that seraphs have the main function of scouting potential vessels in other worlds, and it seems that the advisor did not do such a thing, and instead heralded the destruction of their civilization. But Wise, the only known seraph at this point in time, called himself as the ambassador of a foreign goddess, which is similar to the line messenger of our keeper. I know that ambassador and messenger can be different things, but if you listen to the Japanese voices, both ambassador and messenger mean the same thing. The JP voice used tsukai on both instances.
管理者の使い
神の使い
I don't know, maybe I'm just stretching it, but while I was rereading the story, this part definitely put me off. If the advisor was indeed a seraph, this means that the writers had planned all the way into the Lane Crest arc during the Natera arc, which would be cool but could be unlikely. That's all of the arc-specific questions I have gathered, and these last few questions are concerned with the overall story. Connected to the last segment, what are seraphs anyway? We know that they are servants of keepers that go from world to world to scout for potential vessels. We also know that they aren't human. The only seraph that we know so far, Wise, says that he is not human. So we can only assume that other seraphs are likely not human as well. If they're not humans, how are they created? Where do they come from? Are they creations of keepers? In a similar matter, what are vessels anyway? We know that they serve as the body of the keeper possessing them, because keepers are actually formless and need bodies to fully make use of their powers. The person that they possess completely lose all free will and consciousness. This is easy enough to understand. Nexus's vessel was Lusaria and Nerva's vessel was Lydia. But what's confusing are the existence of former vessels. Former vessels are those characters whose keepers have rescinded their possession of the vessel's body, or have been forcefully ejected from said body. Basically, all of the vessels in the story are now former vessels due to Nexus and Nerva being defeated. The characters who are known to be vessels are Yuan, Meisha, Floes, Lusaria, and Lydia. There's also Kunitsu Amachi, but we've already talked enough about him. Yuan, Meisha, and Floes all exhibit immense power as a side effect of their keepers leaving their bodies. What's unknown is why Lusaria, or Lydia for that matter, do not possess the same powers as them, even though their keepers have already left their bodies. The possible answer is that Nerva and the Keeper of Stagnation willingly left the bodies of Yuan, Meisha, and Floes, leaving behind a trace of their keeper powers, while for the case of Lusaria and Lydia, the keeper possessing them was forcibly ejected, which could also mean that the keeper's residual powers were also ejected. Though all of this was never really explained in the story, and we can only come up with possible answers. Now, enter Baphomet and Castell, two characters that complicate things further. While not being vessels themselves, they still possess powers granted to them by Nerva. It's also not clear how vessels come to be. For Nexus, it seems that she can possess anybody, willing or unwilling, while Nerva needs a willing vessel, such as the case with Yuan and Meisha. If you don't remember, before Nerva could possess Baphomet and Castell, she needed them to be willing vessels for her, but Baphomet gave her an explosive reaction, and Castell was taken back by Verdilia. This is weird, since Nexus didn't need Lusaria to become a willing vessel. I guess each keeper has their own conditions, or lack of conditions for their vessels. Anyways, more explanation regarding keepers and vessels is something worth watching out for in the next story. We're finally in the last question before we move on to the theories. That question is, what happened to the main cast? In the beginning, we didn't think that these 8 heroes would become characters that we would come to love and become our favorites. Well, for me at least, their personalities and interactions in the story definitely helped solidify their popularity. Well, we know for a fact that they are out there still hopping from world to world to help each world's inhabitants from the threat of keepers. We know more about Yuan, because at the end of the Whispers of Purgation arc, we see him recruiting the Legion's leaders and Elena to protect worlds from the threat of keepers. However, as of now, we have no idea where they could be or if they're all serious in participating in this keeper business. Take for example Urias, who's just looking for a good fight, or Luna, who's just there to make friends, or even Rowan, who has a family back home. Unfortunately, the fact that they're relegated as purchasable leaders in Worlds Beyond, implying that their significance would be just through cameos or brief appearances, not like how they did during their prime. To be fair, during the latter half of the story, starting with Reveal, we saw them less and less, only coming back altogether in the final arc. This signifies that each of the OG cast's inner problems, bar Yuan, have been solved. Rowan was able to see his family again and has controlled his curse. Erica came to terms with her deadly past and was able to see her princess again. Luna learned the meaning of letting go and making friends. Isabel came to terms with the death of Kyle. Ares now knows how to live with her mistakes. Urias has found someone who can become his partner. Arisa saved Lusaria, and Yuan finally defeated Nerva, though he still plans to take on the entire population of Keepers. The writers probably noticed this, and that's why they opted to have new main characters every arc after the invasion of the World Reaver. Well, let's see how they come into play in the second story, if they have any. Also, this question extends to the other main characters in the story, like Eleanor, Nicola, Alizard, Bunny and Baron, Itsurugi, Verdilia, Elena, and everybody else. With those major questions in mind, let's now theorize of what the story of Worlds Beyond would entail. Hey, post-edit loop here. Just a disclaimer, Worlds Beyond has just released while I was editing this, and I want to let you guys know that this next segment for theories was made before its release. Despite that, stick around and find out how these theories came to be before anything was revealed. I haven't read the new story yet, so feel free to confirm or debunk any of the theories that will be mentioned here. There is this one theory about Kaori that I will be talking about, and yes, I already know that it is pretty much confirmed, in case you guys will be wondering. Well, with that out of the way, let's get back to the video. This first theory is something that is right in our faces, and it doesn't seem like Cygames is actively hiding it, and that is the fact that Dreizehn, the protagonist of Worlds Beyond, could possibly be from the world of Ylon. In the FAQs with the devs, it is stated there that Dreizen's story starts off with her quote-unquote navigating through a machine-dominated world. The theory suggests that this machine-dominated world is none other than Ylon. Another piece of evidence solidifying this theory is Ylon's central tower being oddly similar or is in fact the same building Dreizen is gazing towards in the teaser trailer. Both buildings have dome roofs with metal braces. Both have the same style of railings, and these things, which are probably the pipes surrounding the city, are present in both images. Of course, both images have the overall look and feel of being a machine-like world with the wires, compact buildings, and stuff. Aside from the teaser trailer, the pre-release stream just showed us new art on Dreizehn's homeworld. Basically, it's similar to what we've been talking about, like the wires, pipes, and similar visual elements. I just don't know what these fang-like protrusions are, but they seem to be somehow related to the spire place that they're talking about. Now, I don't remember if there was such a place as the Spire in Ylon, or maybe it could be the new name of the central tower. Comment down below your thoughts on this. The third piece of evidence in support of this theory is that if this is the central tower of Ylon, it would make sense that Ylon would be in such ruins due to the existence of the card Ylon's Remains. Let me read to you the card's flavor text. This world is nothing more than a giant scrap heap, but the people who were left behind refused to give up hope. They come out of their sectors, shaking off the rust that had settled over them, searching for a new way forward. Tales from Naterra, Entry 7. If you would remember, Ylon was also inhabited by humans living in different sectors, and they were much fearful of Baphomet's rule. Now that Baphomet's gone, they're free to move on and rebuild Ylon, which is a perfect lead-in for a new story. Side note, it's weird that there are still people who were left behind, because why don't they just move to Naterra? Oddly, only the robots took refuge in Naterra, while we see no signs of Ylon humans. Anyways, going back, if this is indeed Ylon, then that would mean that Worlds Beyond takes place after Shadowverse classic story, or at least after invasion of the World River, because the trailer clearly shows a ruined city, and the only time that could have happened is after Baphomet's defeat in Naterra. Honestly, the theory that Dreizehn is from Ylon is very solid, and could possibly be very true, but let's see if that is the case since Cygames has yet to explicitly mention that this is Ylon. Our next theory is actually related to the first one. I just decided to split the two because there are a lot of things to talk about between the two theories. This next theory is about the fact that Dreizehn is another one of Mono, Tetra, and Aenea's sisters, and by extension, one of Baphomet's daughters/robot creation. Now, how could this possibly be? Aside from the fact that Dreizehn is supposedly from Ylon, her name translates to the number 13 in German. Now, what is the significance of her being named 13, and how does this relate to her being one of the robot sisters? If you didn't know, Mono is Greek for the numerical prefix of 1, and is the eldest sister. Tetra is the Greek numerical prefix for the number 4, and she is the middle child. And Aenea means 9 in Greek, the youngest among the three of them. What we see here is that all of the robot sisters are named after numbers. At first glance, you may see no connection between the numbers, seeing that there are numerical gaps between 1 and 4, 4 and 9, and 9 and 13. But what if I tell you, those gaps were already filled? Our answer lies within the flavor text of the Furies, Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone. If you read their evolved flavor texts, we gain important information that these Furies were made from two of their sisters that are named after numbers. Alecto was made from Di and Tri, numbers 2 and 3. Megara was made from Penta and Hexa, the sisters numbered after 5 and 6. And Tisiphone was made from her sisters Hepta and Octo, 7 and 8. If we assume that the Furies are one of Baphomet's latest creations, this would mean that Alecto is number 10, Megara is 11, and Tisiphone is number 12. With all of this information, we now have a complete and confirmed list of Baphomet's 12 robot daughters: Mono, Di, Tri, Tetra, Penta, Hexa, Hepta, Octo, Aenea, Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone. What comes after 12 is obviously 13, and would you look at that, we have somebody who's named after that exact number, Dreizehn. With all of these pieces of information combined with the previous theory of Dreizehn being originally from Ylon, there's a very significant reason to believe that she is indeed one of the robot sisters. However, this theory is not without issues. First is that, why is Dreizehn's name the only one that is German? From Mono to Aenea, all of them are based off of the Greek numerical prefixes for numbers. Another issue is, why do Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone not named after numbers? Although the answer to this may be because they're based off of the Erinyes of Greek mythology, otherwise known as the Furies in Roman, which are basically 3 vengeful goddesses. So, going back, Mono up to Tisiphone, numbers 1 to 12, have some sort of Greek origin to their names, which means Dreizehn really is the only one who has a German origin for her name. What could this possibly mean? Maybe she's actually a different kind of robot with a different origin, or if she's actually made from different materials. Maybe she's not even a robot and is actually human. Or maybe I'm just looking too far into things and that Cygames just wants to name her that way because the Greek prefix for 13 is triskaideka. Whatever the case, let me know down in the comments what you think about Dreizhen's name. Last issue before I move on with the next theory is that if Dreizhen is indeed one of Baphomet's creations, how come we didn't see her or even at least get a mention of her in the first story? It may be because Belf hadn't made her yet, but this is hard to justify because he's already dead. His latest creations would have been the Furies. He wouldn't have the time to create Dreizhen unless she actually already existed during Gears of Rebellion or even before that. The possible answers to this question are that Dreizhen was lying dormant all this time. Second, it could be that she may not actually be Baphomet's creation, which would also explain her different name origin. And lastly, it could also be that Baphomet may have banished Dreizhen to another world similar to Nicola's situation. The first answer may be possible, considering that the info they gave us in the recent stream says that she's searching for answers as to who she is and why she was born. Additionally, in the official website, it definitely states that Dreizhen's a girl with no recollection of her past opens her eyes, which could imply that she just awoke after a long slumber. She just opened her eyes per se. If this is true, this would mean that she doesn't know of her sisters and Baphomet. Maybe during the first part of her story, she will slowly learn of her now far-away family, both literally and figuratively. If she does learn about her robot sisters and Baphomet, this may be the reason why she entered the Feast of Wolves, not as a combatant, but as a seeker of allies. Why, you may ask? Because I theorized that aside from learning about her family, she would also learn about the horrors of the Keepers, of what Nerva did to Baphomet and to Eilon. And this revelation would steer her on a path to becoming a U1 2.0, taking advantage of the Feast of Wolves to recruit other heroes in the fight against Keepers. Another curious thing about Dreizhen's introduction is this first line of text introducing her character. This is a tale of a family that destroyed the world. This really threw me off because if we're going by the theory that Dreizhen's from Eilon, was there such a family that destroyed the world? I mean, if we count the battles between the resistance led by the robot sisters against Baphomet with his Furies, I guess our theory still stands. But I don't remember their battles being that destructive and it would cause this. At best, the reason why Eilon was in ruins was due to the lack of Baphomet's strict maintenance of the city. Could be that it's a family of new characters that we will be introduced to, a family that rose to power from the ruins of former Eilon. Regardless, this is another issue concerning our theories, and it could very well be that Cygames is giving us false leads. Well, that's all I have to say regarding Dreizhen, and it definitely is exciting for what the new story will have for us. Now, these next theories are just minor ones, since there's not really much revealed about the story compared to what we've seen surrounding Dreizhen. Nevertheless, let's look into them. Let's first talk about the Feast of Wolves. If you didn't know, the Feast of Wolves will be the main plot point of Worlds Beyond, or at least in the beginning of this story. According to the Q&A, the story of Worlds Beyond goes something like this. Beings across several worlds, including the new leaders, have been chosen to participate in battle in something known as the Feast of Wolves. Each of the new leaders has their own unique motives for participating, which will be revealed in time. We'll be releasing stories for each leader and their journeys in their respective worlds prior to joining the Feast of Wolves. For example, Dreizhen's story will be centered around her navigating through a machine-dominated world. Right off the bat, it seems like that Worlds Beyond story is going for something new. Instead of the leaders being oblivious to interdimensional travel, it seems like they're all prepping up for this big life or death event for their own reasons. Reasons that we will only come to know once SV2 releases. This is good and all, but doesn't the Feast of Wolves sound similar? We've seen something like this before from Cygames, and that is during the 15th card set of Shadowverse. Yep, that's right, I'm talking about Ultimate Colosseum, or UC for short. This theory suggests that the Feast of Wolves is the same event that happens during the Ultimate Colosseum. Both events have representatives of different worlds come together to fight against each other to claim victory. Here is the preamble for the plot of UC. Wager your world and seize victory. Unrivaled warriors gather from across many domains. The winner claims dominion over all realms, while the defeated are stripped of everything. Now is the time to decide. The hour of battle is upon us. This sounds an awful lot like the Feast of Wolves, don't you think? For more context about the Colosseum, let's read Mammoth God's Colosseum's flavor text. Every 100 years, the towering Mammoth God gathers the strongest fighters from every realm and holds a tournament. To enter, one must possess the 8 essential wills. Competitors flock to the Colosseum, each for their own reason. Every 100 years, the Mammoth God's trumpeting opens wide the gates to other worlds. Victors shall rule, losers shall serve. The clash of desires in the Colosseum shall be offered up to the god. The part where it says that each competitor has their own reason for participating sounds awfully a lot like how the leaders of Worlds Beyond have their own motives for participating in the Feast of Wolves. Another piece of evidence to this theory is the fact that some of the cast from Ultimate Colosseum are already in Worlds Beyond. For example, we can see Kuon, Aragavi, and Garyu already having cards for the game. It may be because it's just a preference of the devs, or it could be because they hold some significance to the story, or at least the theme of the Feast of Wolves. Regardless, like with the other theories, this one also has some pressing issues. First is that we don't see the Mammoth God Colosseum in any of the materials posted so far. The setting of the Feast of Wolves looks like a mishmash of landmarks taken from different worlds, which serve as our leader's battleground. Second, unlike Ultimate Colosseum, the Feast of Wolves don't feature any spectators to watch the event happening live. Third issue is that we'll only be getting 7 leaders in Worlds Beyond due to Shadow and Blood being combined into Abysscraft. The Mammoth Gods Colosseum's card mentions of 8 essential wills. The card of Colosseum on High mentions the strongest of the 8 realms. With Worlds Beyond having only 7 leaders, it doesn't really fit the 8 realms, 8 wheels theme of Ultimate Colosseum. Last issue that this theory needs to address is the fact that Cygames generally separates story-related card sets from non-story-related card sets, meaning that Ultimate Colosseum may be its own thing, and that the Feast of Wolves is another thing, albeit having a similar premise. In any case, it would be definitely cool if Cygames starts to incorporate past card sets into the story. Imagine being able to finally learn more about the Omens or even the Convicts. Our next theory is specifically about Kaori Uehara, the new Runecraft leader, and how she is connected to Saito, the guitarist guy from Amitsuchi. There have been speculations that Kaori might be from Saito's world, Tokyo. First off, both characters have Japanese names. Second, if both of them are from the same world, Tokyo, which is literally just Tokyo spelled differently, it would make sense why they would have Japanese names. Third is that their attire suggests that they come from a modern world. Saito tells us that he is from the Paranormal Disciplinary Division of Tokyo's Bureau of Justice, and Kaori's introduction states that she is a Nayuta-class archmage from a technologically advanced metropolis. Aside from the modernity of their worlds, both of them seemingly have positions or ranks that they possess. Saito as an officer of his division, and Kaori being a Nayuta-class archmage, whatever that means. This theory may be a bit of a stretch, but there's definitely some basis to it. In any case, it would be nice to see more exposition on the worlds that were just mentioned in past, like Lodlur, or even the worlds of the Colosseum fighters, if they are canon. Continuing on with our new characters, our next theory tries to explain what the even is Diol. His introduction just states that he is the Miasma King, a beast of legend from a fog-shrouded town. He doesn't even get a VA. Of course, on the surface, we can see that he is a monster-like character, which is quite unique seeing that all of Shadowverse's main characters are human-like. However, much to the dismay of many Shadowcraft and Bloodcraft players, including me as someone who mains Shadowcraft, having Diol be the face of the new Abysscraft is kinda hard to accept, especially since it's hard to replace Luna, Vampy, or even Urias. I know that these 3 will probably be in the shop sometime soon, but many players were expecting a cool character like Urias or a cute and funny one like Luna or Vampy. Because of this reaction, a theory was concocted based on Diol. The theory suggests that Diol was actually once a human. He or she just got turned into a monster due to a tragic event or something like that. The fact that he didn't get an actual VA leads many to believe that he will soon get one, and at the same time get a design overhaul. Although, he does have the markings of a vessel on his head and on his horns. It looks similar to the ones Yuan has on his forehead and face. Or maybe I could be wrong about this. I wouldn't really be surprised at this point if he were a vessel. I mean, we have a lot of them now. And if he is a vessel, you know what that means. Another keeper to watch out for. Well, that's all there really is to this theory, if you could even call it one. Nevertheless, I'm just listing down all the possible theories so far, and it's just fun to theorize, and it would be also fun to go back on these theories to see how right or how wrong we were. Now, we're down to the last theory we have for today, and I thank you so much for sticking with me up to this point. This one focuses more on the connection between Shadowverse 1 and Worlds Beyond, and about Yuan. In Shadowverse Classic's story, it wasn't explicitly stated, but it seems like Yuan is recruiting people from across worlds to help him in his quest of eliminating the threat of Keepers. It started with Itsurugi, and now he enlisted the help of the Legion and Elena. It could be possible that sooner or later, Yuan will appear in Worlds Beyond to enlist the help of our new leaders in his mission, much like how he requested the help of our original cast and is planning on making some sort of league of world-hopping, keeper-slaying heroes. Conversely, it is possible that keepers would also do the same, creating their own organization of keepers helping one another to assert their main purpose. This is probably unlikely to happen due to keepers being monotone in nature and work for themselves. Nerva did, however, gain more personality during the end, going so far to call these characters as her comrades. Who knows? Maybe we'll get to see keepers that are not as monotone as them and with varying personalities and motives. The problem with this theory as a whole is that there's literally no mention of keepers, vessels, seraphs, or world-hopping shenanigans in any of the materials released so far. It's strange to see that the core themes and plot of Shadowverse have been absent in Worlds Beyond teasers. Well, aside from the different worlds and characters colliding, but you get the point. It could be that the Feast of Wolves is some sort of event that the keeper is conducting, which is probably a big spoiler and that's why there's no mention of a keeper yet. The Feast of Wolves may also be a keeper summoning ritual, like the fACyBLr Venar, and that the Victor's Worlds would be the place of where the keeper would be summoned. Or it could also be that Worlds Beyond is intentionally going in another direction with its story, having little mention of keepers and vessels, which is probably unlikely. And that's about it for the major questions and theories for Shadowverse Worlds Beyond. There's definitely a lot to unpack here and some of the questions we have may remain unanswered for a long time, and the theories we discuss may be completely wrong or completely right. Personally, I am quite excited for whatever Worlds Beyond has in store for us, not just the story, but the gameplay as well. The questions and theories we went over today are just a handful from the many other questions and theories that came up during the first story and the teasers. Take for example the theory that UD is Dreizehn's guns, because they're both AI assistants, or that Dreizehn is Belphamet's last resort against Nerva, which alludes to her being called the Doomsday Machine. There are many flavor texts that have yet to be analyzed and many details in the story that are probably not noticed, but most of those are best left for another video. Hey, maybe an iceberg video is in order. Anyways, that's it from me. Leave a like and comment if you found this video helpful. And if you want to see more Shadowverse and Rage of Bahamut lore videos, subscribe so you don't miss out. See you on the next adventure, World Hoppers.